Good afternoon, Grade 10 Geography learners. I am Regan Ford, the Subject Advisor in Metro Central, and this afternoon I will be showing you a few tricks and a few tips to use when you are preparing yourselves for your Mapwork section of your question paper. I welcome all of you this afternoon, and I would especially like to welcome the four ladies from Homer High School that I met earlier in the week, Sisanda, Amanda, Bonkiwe, and Iletu. This one's for you. Enjoy it, girls. Right, let's get started. So, in Mapwork, there are two sections that we need to take note of, and the one is the application of work that we have learned. In other words, this would be your calculations, etc. We apply this in the question paper, and then the interpretation of the map, what we see on the map in front of us, how do we interpret it? Now, in order to interpret a map, we use symbols. A map is a sheet of paper that depicts reality, and we can't have everything that we see in reality on the map. So, in other words, if you look at the screen in front of you, for example, you will see 4 pictures there. 4 pictures of things, of features that we can observe on a map. Now, you won't see these features as they are portrayed on the screen in front of you. These features will be represented by a symbol. Now, let's look at a few of the more common symbols that we use when we do our Mapwork section of geography. So, there you see the symbol for a national freeway. A freeway is a road that has no traffic lights, no stop signs, and hence the word freeway, because you can travel freely without having to stop. Here we have a benchmark. That is what a benchmark looks like. It's a little concrete structure on the side of the road showing us the height above sea level of the road at that particular point. Here we have a railway line. All of you have seen railway lines before, so this is not new to you. And we have a bridge where a road reaches a river and we have to cross the river, so we use a bridge, and that's what a bridge looks like in reality, and also the symbol on a map for a bridge. Here we have 2 features. One of them might look strange to you and one might look very, very familiar. So the one on the left is a water tower. Now, you would have seen the symbol for a water tower on the maps that your educators have given you to work with in the class, and this is what a water tower looks like. It's a tall structure. Water is collected at the top, and gravity is used to feed water from the structure to the buildings where they are needed, and that is why the structure is so tall, so that we can use the force of gravity to take the water where we want it to be. And the one on the right is obviously a wind pump, also known in some places as a windmill. Okay, and we know that the wind blows, it's connected to the pump, and it pumps water out of the ground, and that is the symbol for a wind pump on the map. Here we have a communication tower. It's a W symbol on an upside down T, and we can see why it's called a communication tower. This tower will usually be found on the outskirts of a town or higher up, and we see there are little satellite dishes and aerials connected to it that collects information from various sources. Here is an old favorite, a trigonometrical station, and like the benchmark earlier, the trig station shows us the height above sea level of a particular point. Now, trigonometrical stations and benchmarks are real things. The trig station is the white here. It's mounted on a little tower. It can be on a rock, it can be found anywhere in a mountainous area, in a flat area, but the white concrete structure with the metal bit at the top, that is your trig station. Okay? The other 2 ways of indicating height on the map, the contour line and the spot height, those 2 things don't really exist in reality. Those are symbols that we use on a map to show height as well. Let's move on. Here we have a row of trees. Later on, we're going to refer to the row of trees once again. And the row of trees has more than one purpose. It is often used just to beautify an area, to make an area look aesthetically more beautiful, but it can also be used to block the wind. If it's an area that's particularly windy and you're growing sensitive crops, it would then make sense to plant a row of trees to block the wind and protect your crops. And it also, if your farm or your house is located alongside a very busy road, it would make sense to plant a row of trees that could then block the sound. Here we have an example of cultivated lands, and that looks like maize growing there to me. Now grade 10, what's very important, when you are asked in the exam which activity is taking place, remember cultivated land is not an activity. Cultivated land shows me that crop farming is taking place. The land is cultivated. So the symbol for cultivated land is an indication that crop farming is taking place, right? That's very important. The activity is not cultivated land. Similarly, when you get orchards and vineyards, an orchard and vineyard is not an activity. The activity taking place there is fruit farming. In the case of a vineyard, it will be specifically grape farming. Okay, so be very careful. Let's go back to our slide. We have here a power line. You can see the power lines transporting electricity, and the symbol is a solid black line with black little dots along it, all equidistant from one another. And then over here, obviously, we have a cemetery, and that is the symbol for a cemetery. In the top left, we have a place of worship. The symbol is a dot with a K. It comes from the Afrikaans word kerk. But once again, the place of worship does not have to be a church. A place of worship could be a synagogue. It could also be a mosque. The slide there shows the wall of the dam. And the dam wall you can see here is the black line and the water accumulating behind the dam wall we can see in the symbol as well. There are coastal rocks, and we see the symbol for the coastal rocks, and we can see how appropriate the symbol is. And over here we have an international boundary. If I'm not mistaken, this is one of the boundaries between South Africa and Mozambique. It is quite close to the Kruger National Park, if my memory serves me right. So this is an international boundary, a boundary between two countries. That's what the word international means, between two countries. The symbol for a store is a W next to a little black dot. The black dot indicates the building, and the letter usually indicates the function of the building. Once again, the W comes from the Afrikaans word winkel. In this case, our store excuse me, in this case, our store is a large shopping mall, but it could have been a normal little corner shop as well. Okay, the W covers them all. Then we have a reservoir. This is a water tank. This one is covered, and you can see there's a trig beacon at the top. It's usually covered to prevent evaporation, water being lost through evaporation. And here we have a built-up area, lots of buildings, and because it's difficult to indicate all the individual buildings on your map, we just shade a particular area in grey, and that then tells me that this is a built-up area. And the last symbol on this slide is an excavation. An excavation means that we've been digging out. You will often see the word diggings also close to an excavation, and it is usually symbolic of an open cast mine. And we can see the mining activities taking place here where a large section of the Earth's crust has been removed. There's a perennial river. Notice how broad the river is. It has water in it throughout the year. That is why it is called a perennial or a permanent river. Notice the symbol, it is solid blue. Here is a non-perennial river. This river, what we see at the moment is the river during the dry season. We can see the river gravel at the bottom. Okay, and the symbol that you will see on the map is a dashed or dotted line indicating a non-perennial river. Here we have a protected area. It is usually a green symbol, as you can see at the bottom. In this case, the protected area is the Kabonkelberg. It is part of the Cape Town Nature Reserve, the Cape Peninsula Nature Reserve, and specifically it is found very, very close, in fact just on the outskirts of Hout Bay in Cape Town. So all the learners of Hout Bay High School, Mr. Adam Carollison's learners, this picture was taken close to your school. Here we have a lighthouse and a marine light. Okay, in this case it's a lighthouse, it's a building. Sometimes it is just a light without the huge building below it, and then we call it a marine light. And that's the symbol. And that symbol indicates that there is some sort of structure which gives off light at night to tell ships not to come too close. It shows the ships where the coastline is, especially when the coastline is very dangerous. So it will warn the captain of the ship, do not come too close here. Your ship is going to sink if you come a little bit too close to this light. Right. Now, you need to know all the symbols. Here is a summary of a few of the symbols that we looked at. And you can see that the symbols can be divided into three groups. We have what we call point symbols. These are single points, like the little dots to indicate buildings, the dot with a P for a post office, a dot with a PS next to it for a police station. We saw the shop one or store one earlier. We saw the place of worship earlier, etc., etc. Okay? Then there are your line symbols. These symbols are in the shape of a line. Your various roads, your national freeway, your main roads, etc. Your railway lines, your tracks and footpaths, your power lines, and your rivers. These are all examples of linear or line symbols. And then the symbols which take up an area, a square or a triangle or a rectangle, or a shape that is relatively shapeless, right? So there we can see our excavations and our cemeteries, our marshes, our dams, etc. Those are all area symbols. Grade 10s try to learn as many of these symbols as possible. Remember, there will be a key at the bottom of the map where you can actually go and look and see what the symbol is. But it's nice to know what it is. So the next time your teacher gives you a map, take that map, have a look. If you see a symbol and you don't understand what it is, just do a Google search and search for a picture of that particular feature, and then you'll be able to see, and it will help you to understand. And remember, when you're answering questions in Mapwork, if I know what this symbol represents, and I can picture it in my head, it will help me to answer questions, as you will see as we move further along in the question paper. Right, let's move on. Map reading. Now, when you are reading or interpreting a map, there are various things that help you. And as you can see on the slide, the first thing we're going to look at is the use of color. The use of color is very important, and if you can understand how color has been used, it will help you to interpret the map better and to be able to answer your questions better. Now, in geography, we use a system called the RDICE system. Let's have a look. What does this mean? The R stands for relief, and you know that the relief is your build of your land, your structure of your land, your mountains, your valleys, your flatlands, etc. Drainage refers to anything with water, your rivers, your lakes, your dams. Infrastructure, these are things, these are features that help us to do our daily activities more effectively. And infrastructure includes transport networks like roads, railway lines, etc., bus stops, harbors. Infrastructure also includes your power lines, the pipelines carrying water to settlements, carrying oil to settlements. Okay? These are all things that are included under infrastructure. The next point on our slide is settlements. And these are obviously the buildings that we have, where we live, where we do our daily activities. And then the last thing, the E, stands for economic activities. These are the jobs that we are engaged in on a daily basis, the different types of work that your parents and your family and various people do on a daily basis. Now, if you look at the slide, you will see that relief is usually indicated in brown. Remember, we said we are going to be looking at how color is used, and the color brown shows us the relief. So when you are asked any question about the build, about the relief, about whether the ground is steep or flat or gradual, all that you have to focus on is the brown. In your head, fade out the greens and the blues and the reds and just focus on the brown. And it will tell you more about the relief of the area. Your teacher's obviously going to teach you more about this as you progress in grade 11 and grade 12. But remember that brown tells us about the relief. And drainage, obviously, if I had asked you the color for drainage, all of you would have shouted that it is blue, because blue indicates water, and we mentioned earlier that drainage refers to the water. Then infrastructure, we use two colors there. We use red and we use black. And I'll show you some more examples, but you can remember earlier I showed you a power line, and you saw that the power line was the black line with the black dots along it. And then we also looked at the various types of roads, and you saw that some roads are indicated in red as well. There are other colors, but red and black are the predominant two colors that we use for indicating infrastructure. Settlements are usually in gray. There could be other colors involved as well, but your main settlement is gray. And then economic activities, when they are primary, like for farming, they are green, like your cultivated lands, your orchards and vineyards, etc. And when they are industrial activities, they will be in black. Now, when we look at the relief, what you know already is that when our brown contour lines are far apart, the slope is gradual, it is almost flat. The further apart the contour lines are, the flatter the area is. And the closer together our contour lines are, the steeper the slope will be. Now for grade 10, that is all you need to know. If there are any grade 11s or 12s tuned in, you're quite welcome to be joining us, but remember, you need to know a little bit more about the relief, right? The grade 11s and 12s. But this broadcast is aimed at the grade 10s, so that is what they need to know. Then, when it comes to drainage, you need to know the types of rivers. You don't have to know all. Basically, at grade 10 level, you need to be able to differentiate between a perennial and a non-perennial river. You need to be able to identify a dam, and you need to be able to identify the ocean on a map. And at grade 10s, your infrastructure, main roads will be red, railway lines will be black. Settlements will be grey, and what we need to know at grade 10 level already, and grade 12s, you need to know this as well, is that your settlements are a source of labor and they are a market. So often you will be asked, why are the industries located in a certain area? So you will know that for industries to be present, you need a source of water, there must be transport, etc. But if there is a settlement close to your industries, then you know that that settlement provides a source of labor. In other words, the people who are going to work in the factories live in the settlement. But your settlement plays a second important role. It also provides a market for these industries. So in other words, the products that are produced in the industries can be sold in that settlement, and therefore we say it is the market for the industries. I'm sure you all understand that. Let's move on. Farms and industries, as I've mentioned. Right. So we get a mental image of the map. There's an extract of the map of Mapwork, right? And what is important? Let's do the Ardise thing quickly. Relief. So we're going to look at mountains, valleys. Where's the highest point? Where's the lowest point? Where is it steep? Is the area flat, etc.? That is what you're going to be looking at for relief. For drainage, what types of rivers do I have here? Are the rivers perennial? If the rivers are perennial, it tells me that there's a lot of rainfall in this area because there's always water in my river. Are there dams? Can I see the sea? That will tell me about the climate. If there are lots of dams in an area, then perhaps it doesn't rain that much. Because what do we use dams for? To collect water. So if it rains a lot, we don't need lots and lots of farm dams. But if it doesn't rain a lot, your farmers need to collect water so that in the dry season they have a supply of water. So it will tell us a little bit about the climate and the rainfall of the area. Okay, let's go back to our slide. Infrastructure. We can see the main roads, we can see the railway lines, we can see the built-up grey areas of the settlement, and we can see our economic activities on the map. And what is important is to look at the relationship between the colors. Because often, when there is a lot of blue, lots of rivers and stuff, there will be a lot of green. There will be lots of farming activities. And on a map depicting an area where there are very, very few rivers, you might discover also that there are very few farming activities because they are related to one another. In an area where the contour lines are far apart, telling me that the area is very flat, I would possibly find lots of industries, lots of factories, the economic activities. Why? Because factories cannot be built on a steep slope. They need flat land to be built. So we need to look at the relationships between these various factors that we look at on the map. So let's go back to our slideshow again. Sorry. And here we have an extract of the map of Ceres. And let's look at our RDIS system: relief, drainage, infrastructure, settlements, and economic activities. And immediately I notice that towards the west of the map, on the western side of the map, the contour lines are extremely close together. Can you see that? Just look carefully. Look how close those contour lines are to one another, which tells me that this is a steep mountainous area. And you notice there are no buildings, very few buildings. There are a few little black blockies on the in the brown area there, but very, very few. There's hardly any settlements. There's the dam at the top, the Ceres Dam at the top of the mountain. I can see Ceres Peak, but very few human activities taking place. Why? Because the contour lines are close together. But when you look on the other side, when you look on the western half of the map, as you are looking at the map on your right, the western half of the map, look at all the activities. There's the grey settlement of Ceres. There's lots of farming taking place. I see industries. We're going to look at them closer now. Why? Because the contour, you can hardly even see any contour lines. They're so far apart that we can't identify many contour lines. So it's extremely flat. Let's look at the drainage. There's a river, and there are quite a few dams, farm dams in the area. Let's look at the infrastructure. There's a main road. There's a railway line. Now learners, do you notice something? Do you notice that the river, the railway line, and the main road all pass through the mountain? Do you see that? Just look. They all, if you start on the northern and eastern side of the map, they all move towards a central point and they all go through the mountain at the same point. I want you to ask your teachers to show you pictures of this. You can just go and Google search it yourself. But what is happening there, where the river goes through the mountain, that river has carved a valley into the mountain. And at that point where the river is flowing, it is the lowest point in the mountain. That is why the road and the railway line will be built along those slopes lower down, because it is the lowest point. And your vehicles, your trains and your trucks and your cars do not have to cross a very, very high mountain. They pass through the valley lower down in the mountain. And often I want you to take note of this when you look at your maps. Often you will notice that your transport infrastructure, your roads and your railway lines in particular, where they pass through a mountain, 9 out of 10 times I guarantee you there will be a river close to where the road and the railway line is passing through the mountain, because that is the lowest point and the easiest point, right? The grade 12s that have tuned in today, you will obviously need to think about gap towns, gateway towns and gap towns in your knowledge of geography. But for the grade 10s, it's just something I want you to think about. You don't have to know it, but I want you to start noticing these things. Let's go back to our map. Right. So, there's the settlement of Ceres, the built-up area, the town, the dorp of Ceres, the town of Ceres. Okay? There's the economic activities. Notice predominantly farming. Look at all the green. But we also have this area here. Do you see that? I'll just go back. Do you see this area being shaded now? That's the industrial area. That's where the industries are taking place. So by using my R-DICE method, I have a picture in my mind. I can see mountains, steep, not a lot of activity, flat. There's a settlement. There's farming taking place. There's industries. I saw the river. I saw the railway line. I saw the road. They're all coming through the mountain at the lowest point. The river provides water for the settlement and for the farming activity and for the industries. The road provides access to Ceres. I'm not even looking at the map, but I can see it in my mind. The road provides access to Ceres through the mountain. People can get to Ceres. We can take products out. We can bring raw materials in. The railway line similarly. Okay, I see the settlement, the grey area. So there's probably buildings and houses and stuff there. And in my mind, I've got the picture. Now when I'm asked questions about activities and things happening in Ceres, it's much clearer to me. So grade 10s, use the system. Every time you pick up a map, try to visualize what the area looks like before even looking at the questions. And I guarantee you, when you start reading the questions, you will already have the answer to some of them up here in your beautiful, beautiful brains that you have up here in your heads. So let's move on. Right. We are now going to start looking at map application. We're about halfway through our presentation now, and we're going to start looking at the application of what we know on a map. Right. Now, often you will be asked to identify features on a orthophoto. Now let's have a look. Here we have an orthophoto map. And the question is, identify the features from A to H on the orthophoto map. Now just to digress a little bit, when you are asked a question like this, A to H, grade 10s, that means A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. It does not mean, I've encountered so many times when marking grade 12 papers, that the learners, when you ask identify A-H, that means from A to H and everything in between. It does not mean only A and H. So, we need to identify the features A to H on the orthophoto map. Now, when you look at that grey orthophoto map, it's difficult. You can't see names or things written there. So, what you need to do, you need to match up the orthophoto map that you have in front of you with the topographical map that you have in front of you. Now in this case it's very easy because the orthophoto map has been put on top of the photographic map, of the topographic map, on the slide. You will be sitting with two different maps, but line them up. And now I can see when I look at my map, I can see that A is a track. I can see that B is an aerodrome. I can see that C is the Model Aircraft Club, and that D is the Horse Riding Club, and that E is a built-up area, Avian Park. I can see that F is Noble Park, which is some sort of recreational area, and that G is a school, because on the topographic map at the bottom, I can see the symbol for a school. And H is a sewage works, and that makes it so much easier. If I had only been looking at the orthophoto map, I would have been guessing. Some of them I would have gotten right, like track, for example. I would have guessed that it's some sort of a sports field. But I would not have known that that was a sewage works, or that the other one was a school. I would have seen that it was a building. But by cross-referencing between the orthophoto and the topographical map, I was able to see that that building had an S next to it on the actual topo map, and that told me that the particular building was a school. And that is how you integrate between a topographic map on the one hand and an orthophoto map on the other hand. Let's go and look at some more skills that we can use on our maps. Alright, so here we have a road. Those of you that live in the Southern Cape, in the George and Eisner area, you will know this road, okay? And we are looking at the N2 as it moves along the coast. And the question is, you are traveling by car or by motorcycle along the national road from A to B. So you're driving from A to B. Identify the natural features that you can see on your journey. Now, grade 10s, the key word there for me is natural. Look at the adjectives. You will always be nudged in a certain direction when they're asking you a question. So in other words, when I see that word natural features, the examiner does not want human-made features. I don't like the word man-made because women also make things, right, girls? So human-made features. So they don't want me to talk about bridges and roads and da-da-da. Natural features, things that occur naturally. Now let's see how many we can identify on this map. So as we start from A, what I would have done was to put my finger at A and move it along the road. And the first natural feature I encounter is the woodland. It's colored in green. I then encounter a river. The road crosses a river. On the side of the road, there are trees, the little green circles. The road passes the river mouth. There are coastal rocks. I can see the ocean. I can see sand. I can see the lagoon. And I can see the marsh. I dare say that you would probably find one or two more that I didn't see or that I couldn't identify. But there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 natural features that I've identified as I travel from A to B. Now, next question. If I was setting this Mapwork paper and I'm using the same map in 2 or 3 years' time, I would just change the question slightly. It's the same question, but now I'm asking for constructed features, human-made features that we can see on the journey. And obviously the road itself that we're traveling on is a human-made feature, is a constructed feature. But there's a railway line, there's a tunnel, there are buildings, there's a railway station, there's a secondary road, there's a bridge along the secondary road, there's what we call an other road. An other road is a road that's not the main road, not a secondary road, not a freeway, so we call it an other road. And there's a holiday resort. And once again, I'm sure that you've identified 1 or 2 more that I haven't identified on this particular slide, but the important thing is that we've differentiated between natural features and human-made or constructed features. And grade 10s, I cannot emphasize to you how important this is. That when you are answering questions, not only in the Mapwork section of your paper, because remember your paper 1 has a Mapwork section, the 3rd question, as does your paper 2. There's a Mapwork question, the 3rd question. But also in the other part of the question paper as well, the theory part of the question paper. It's important to read your question and to make sure that you understand exactly what the examiner requires from you. Too often we try to rush through and we walk out of that exam venue and what did we say? I aced that paper. That paper was easy. Yo, that paper was so easy. But when your teacher starts marking the paper, and they want to start crying when they see what you wrote, because they know how bright you are and how brilliant you are, because you are geography students, you're the brightest and the most brilliant of them all. But we make mistakes because we are in a hurry. So, read the question. They want me to look for natural features. The examiner wants me to look for human-made or constructed features in this case. Right? So be very, very careful. Let's move on. Here is another map, a map of Franschhoek. Would it be warmer at the Huguenote Monument at A or at Trig Station 50 at B? Explain your answer by referring to the map. Now grade 10s, Whenever you are asked something, it might seem as if it's a random question. But whatever you're going to be asked, either in the theory or in the Mapwork section, you have been taught this work. So when you are asked something, this question might seem like something new to you. You are given 2 points on the map and they're asking you where it's warmer. Now you sit and you think, yo, how am I supposed to know this? Ask yourself, where did I learn this in my theory? You remember the section on temperature, factors influencing temperature. You learned about altitude, the higher you go, the colder it becomes. You learned about distance from the ocean. We looked at ocean currents. Ring a bell? If I'm not mistaken, you did that way back in term 1. Am I right? Now, think about it. Altitude, the higher you go, the colder you become. Look at that map. Let's go look at it. At point A, what's the height there? 277.8 meters. It is the spot height, and it shows me that the height is 277.8 meters above sea level. Sorry, it's a benchmark. I'm so sorry. It's a benchmark. No, it is a spot height. It's next to the benchmark. 277.8 meters above sea level. And when I look at the trig station, the height is 1028.7 meters above sea level. So it's going to be colder there. The higher you go, the colder it becomes. So the higher temperature where it's going to be warmer is going to be at the Huguenot Monument. Okay? And we used altitude factors. If you look on the right-hand side of your slide, we used the altitude factor. That is, those are the 4 factors that we learned that determine the temperature of a place. And in this case, we looked at altitude and we saw the increase of height. So the warmer place is going to be at the Huguenot Monument, and the reason for that is because it is lower in altitude. It is lower down in altitude. Okay, do you see that? So we're always going to look at what have we done before and how do I use it here in the Mapwork. I'm applying. Remember the section that we're looking at now? Application. I'm applying what I know from somewhere else in geography. I'm applying when answering my Mapwork paper. And grade 10 is going to tell you something. When I was at school, I loved Mapwork. You know why? To me, Mapwork was like being a detective. Because everything that I need, every answer is there on the map. But I've got to use my skills, my detective skills, to go and find those answers. The same like a detective has to use his or her skills to go and catch the killer, the murderer, or the robber, or the bad person, the criminal. Excuse me. I've got to use my geographic skills. The things that I've learned, I've got to apply it. Application, I've got to apply it so that I can find the answers on the map. And the nice thing is all the answers are there. All the answers are there. You just have to go and look for it. Let's move on. Now, here's a dam. Here's a huge dam, the Falfley Dam. This is not a farm dam. This is a huge storage dam. And the question is, for what purpose is the dam used? Now, water we use for 3 things. And if you look at the slide quickly, let's go back to the slide. We use it for irrigation. In other words, that means to water our crops. So in other words, for farming. Whenever you see the word irrigation, all that it means is watering the crops. So if your father is standing with a hosepipe and he's watering the garden, he's irrigating the garden. That is irrigation that he is practicing. Then water can be used for drinking or for household purposes. And water can be used for recreation. It can also be used for industries. It can also be used for mining. Okay? But in this case, we're going to find these 3. So let's go and have a look quickly. When water is used for irrigation, what gives it away are the canals and the furrows. So you need to look. Do you see canals? Do you see furrows? And to make it easier for you, because I know the slide might be a little bit small on your screen, there are canals and furrows. So, and those canals and furrows are taking water away from this dam towards the farm. So that's an indication that the water of this dam is being used for irrigation purposes. I can also see that this water is being used for water because the 2 areas that are circled in red, the one is a purification plant and the one is a filtration plant. The water is being filtered and it is being purified. Why? Because I want to drink the water. You want to drink the water, we want to use the water in our homes. And we can't have water that has lots of twigs and leaves and sand in it. So the minute there's water purification taking place or water filtration, the water is being filtered or purified, it means that the water is being made fit for human consumption. And that tells me that the water of this dam is also used for drinking purposes. Now let's go and have a look at the third factor there. And the third one, we speak about recreation. And if you look at the dam, about 2 centimeters either side of the dam, you will see that there are various hotels, nature reserves, caravan parks. There's a yacht club, there's a caravan park, there's a something camp I see there. Okay, there's a nature reserve, and that shows me that the water here is also being used for recreational purposes. So we've identified 3 things. We've identified water being used for irrigation, water being used for household purposes, specifically drinking, but also for washing your clothing or washing our bodies, etc. And then water that was used for recreational purposes. We do not see any industries around this dam. Otherwise, we could have said water being used for industrial purposes as well, or mining. But if we look at the area around the dam, there is no indication of mining. There is no indication of industries. So we therefore cannot speak about those factors. So grade 10s, I think you're becoming excited. I can see it in your eyes. Yeah, you're getting excited, and Mapwork is not as boring and not as difficult and as hard as you think it is. In fact, it's quite interesting and it's quite easy. But let's move on, otherwise we're going to run out of time. So here's a map of a town. The town is Brits. You don't see the whole map, it's an extract. And Brits is a large town situated close to the Hartbeespoort Dam in the northwest province of South Africa. And the question that was asked in this grade 10 paper was, list the holiday or tourist attractions found on the map. Now grade 10s, I want to stop here for a brief second and I want you to listen carefully. Use your common sense. I've encountered question papers where the examiner asked the same question. Which activities can tourists engage in? Which activities are there for fun or for leisure? And then people will say, oh, there is a cemetery. There is a church. There's a hospital. Now, whilst those places are important, do they qualify as leisure activities? Do you go to a cemetery when you're on holiday? Do you go to, unless you get ill, do you go to a hospital when you're on holiday? No, we don't. So we're going to look for things that we would like to do when we're on holiday. So let's go back to that map and see what we can find there. Right. So when I look at this map, there's a hiking trail. That dashed line there shows me that there's a hiking trail. People love hiking. Okay. There's a golf course. Go north. See there? There's a golf course just north of the 5112, the road 5112. There's a caravan park. There's another camping site. There's a holiday resort. There's another holiday resort. There's a snake park for those of you that like those slippery creatures. There's a yacht club. There's an archaeological site for people who are into that. My eyes are very bad, but I think I see an aerial cableway, which means that up that steep slope, there's a cableway to take you up to the top of the hill where you can get a better view of what's happening around you. And I'm sure that if I left you for long enough with this map, you would find one or two other holiday or tourist attractions. Okay, so you have an idea now of what to look out for when asked that question. Now, here's another extract from a map. Same area. And the question is, give reasons for the low population density. Now, look at the question. Are you being asked, is the population density high or low? No, you're not. You are being told, listen here, in this area, the population density is low. Why? Why is this so? Now, I've already put it in. Otherwise, we're going to run out of time. Notice the slopes. See the contour lines, R-dies. We are R-diesing here now. Look at the slopes. Contour lines are close together, which means that this area on the western side, your left in other words, It's a very high area. It's got steep slopes. It's difficult to build there. Okay? Look at the rivers. Do you see any perennial rivers? Any solid blue lines? No, not at all. All the blue lines here are dashed or dotted lines, which tells me there's not a lot of water. These rivers do not have water in them throughout the year. And then the other feature that I've identified, where the land is flat, and we could possibly have built houses and industries and stuff, there's a marsh. The area is soggy, it is waterlogged. The area there is soaking wet. There's no ways you're going to be able to build any form of settlement where the marsh is. And there's now three reasons why the population density is so low. What I want you to notice on the slide, so we've looked at the water, we've looked at the relief, and we've kind of looked at the soil. We said it's too marshy. Okay? We couldn't really identify any climate factors, and we couldn't identify any resource factors. Suppose water is a resource, but any other resources we couldn't identify on the map. So we could use three of the factors. Those are the factors that you learnt in your the population section, right? When you did population in earlier this term, last term in the third term, when you did the section on population, you learned those 5 factors: that water, climate, soil, relief, and resources. That is what determines where people live and how many people live there. And in that little map extract, we could find 3 of those factors. We could look at the water, we could look at the soil, in other words, the ground being too marshy, and we could look at the relief, where we said it was far too steep. Okay, we've got about 10 minutes left, so let's move on and get in as much as we can. Right, so let's go back to that map of Ceres. We have that map. We know on the western side, there's a steep mountainous area. On the eastern side, it is flatter, and there are lots of people living and lots of activities. Now look at the heading. Factors that influence the population density. In other words, how many people there are, and distribution. So we're not looking at one thing only. We are looking at the density of the population. How dense is it? And where are the people found in Ceres? So let's have a quick squiz at this. Okay. So there's water available from the dam. Now remember, the dam does not have to be where the people are living, because we use pipelines. Your dams are usually a little bit away from where the people's dams take up space. And I don't want a dam in an area where I could have been building houses. And we'd prefer to have our dams higher up in the mountain so that we can use gravity to lead the water downhill towards where we want it. So there's lots of water available, so that means that there can be quite a bit of people living there. There's also a river available which provides water. On the western side, the slopes are steep, so that's a negative factor. And we'll notice that there's no settlement, no people living on the western side of this little map extract. In the valley, there's a town, there's a settlement that has been built, so that would attract people, and that would affect the distribution. More people will be living on that side. There's farming taking place, which indicates to me that the soil is fertile, which means that more people can live there. Oh, there's industries and farms. So people will be attracted because there's work for them. Nobody's going to go and live in a place where they can't find a job and where they can't look after their families and feed their families. Okay, so I just skipped off that now so you all understand that, and we can quite clearly see that in the town of Ceres, there's quite a few people living, and most of the people live in the eastern side of the settlement. Now, here is an extract from an orthophoto map, and earlier on I told you that we'll be coming back to look at rows of trees, and I can identify many rows of trees on this map extract. And there's the reasons. I spoke about them earlier. They serve as a windbreak. Notice they're all along, they're close to where the farmhouse is here at Westerdale. Then where there's farming taking place, there's an orchard. If you look in the middle of the extract down towards the bottom, towards the south, you will see there's an orchard there, and there are rows of trees all around it, busy protecting it from the wind. Okay, It also reduces soil erosion, and it's got an aesthetic value. It beautifies the area. It makes the area look nicer. Okay. In your Mapwork paper, you can get an infographic. So in this infographic, there's a text telling us more about Mapwork in the Eastern Karoo, being used as a major railway junction. There is a little graph showing me the population of Mapwork in the year 2011 and 2013. And what I immediately notice is that the population has dropped from over 7,000 people to just over 3,000 people over the 2-year period. And then at the bottom, when I'm looking at the map, when you did population movements and when you looked at the depopulation of rural areas in the third term, you would have looked at the factors such as employment, education, shops, entertainment, industries, mining, farming, and resources, or the lack of these things causing people to leave. And we're not going to look at this map in detail now, we don't have time, but when you examine this map, when you actually go and look at this map in closer detail, you will notice that in Mapwork, for example, there's very few industries, there are very few shops and stuff, so there's very few places where people can work. There aren't many schools, there are no tertiary institutions, so people will leave to find better education somewhere else. They'll find places where there are more shops, entertainment, etc. Okay? And those are the sorts of things that we are going to be looking at or looking for. So let's answer the questions quickly. We've already answered them. Does the population of Mapwork show an increase or decrease? The graph is going down, so it's a definite decrease. Why did the town experience increased unemployment? That answer we're going to get from the text. Okay. Drastic decline in local businesses leading to increased unemployment. So the decrease in the local businesses, there were fewer businesses in the town. The number of businesses started to drop. Many businesses closed down. And then the rest of them we can actually get from the map, which the question says why according to the topographic map. So when you get an infographic like this, remember, go to the part of the infographic that gives you your answer. This is a fun activity. Match A, B, and C on the map with 1, 2, and 3 on the photographs. And this was quite easy because at A, you'll see it's an industrial area, so I'll match it with the factories at 3. At B, there's a building with an S next to it, and photo number 2 is a photo of Klein Nederberg Secondary School in Paul. And then the third one, C, is obviously Paul Rock, I can see there, and it matches with picture number 1. This is a fun activity, very, very easy, but once again, we're using information on the map to match with particular photographs. Right, we've come to the end of our presentation, but very importantly, before we go, when you are going to write your Mapwork exam, you need to come prepared. Other than having studied and practiced, answering as many questions on as many maps as possible, you need to come prepared. So what do you bring along to your Mapwork exam? Let's have a look at what you need to bring along. So ensure that in your bag you have the following. You must have a pencil. Make sure that it's sharp. Put in 2 or 3. Make sure you've got a sharpener to sharpen it as well. And an eraser. So that if you make any mistakes, you can rectify them. Remember, you cannot write with a pen on those maps. Those topographical maps are awfully expensive. And you can't go and write on them with a pen. So we bring an eraser with as well. You're going to need a good ruler. A plastic one is better. A see-through plastic, transparent plastic one is even better. So make sure that you've got a nice clean ruler with the numbers clear on them. Don't come with a ruler with faded numbers. How on earth are you going to measure distance if your numbers are faded? You're going to need a protractor because you're going to have to measure angles, especially when you've got to measure bearing. Bring a calculator. You're allowed to use a calculator. So if you're allowed to use it, use it. Why must you make your own life difficult when doing your calculations? And then lastly, if you have one in grade 10s, buy a magnifying glass. When you get to my age one day, oh, I need a magnifying glass just to drive down the road. But bring a magnifying glass along so that you can look at the map through the magnifying glass and it becomes bigger. And sometimes that tiny text or those tiny little symbols, you will then be able to see much better. Grade 10s, it's been great fun being with you this afternoon. I really enjoyed this session. I hope that you did too. Please practice your map book. Speak to your teachers. Ask them to help you and practice your map book. Thank you for tuning in today. Please look after yourselves. Don't do silly things. Take care. It's almost time for your final exam. You'll be writing within the next few weeks. And I'm hoping to see every single one of you in grade 11 next week. For the Afrikaans grade 10 learners, this broadcast will be rebroadcast again in Afrikaans. Ask your teachers, check on Facebook, check the telematic schedule to see when the Afrikaans broadcast will be taking place. Educators, those of you that stayed behind with your learners this afternoon, thank you so much for everything that you do for our children. It is greatly appreciated. Thank you and goodbye, everyone.